The Valari had watched the stars for 3,000 years. They were a peaceful people with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that reflected the light of distant suns. They had built beautiful cities on 12 worlds. They had created art and music that made other species weep with joy. They had never started a war. They had never needed to. Now their worlds were burning. Ambassador Lyra stood in the Grand Council chamber on the homeworld of Ashara. Her hands would not stop shaking. Through the tall windows, she could see the sky turning orange. Somewhere in orbit, Krath warships were destroying the defense stations one by one. Each flash of light in the sky meant another 1,000 of her people were dead. Elder Bren sat at the head of the council table. He was old, even by Valari standards. His blue skin had faded to almost white, and his eyes were tired. He had led his people through times of peace and plenty. He did not know how to lead them through this. How many? He asked. 12 million, Lyra answered. Her voice broke on the number. 12 million dead in the last 3 days. The colony on Veth has gone silent. We believe everyone there is gone. The council members made sounds of grief. Some covered their faces. Others stared at nothing. The Krath Dominion has never been defeated, Elder Bren said quietly. In 800 years, they have consumed 47 civilizations. Entire species exist now only as slaves or memories. We must do something, a young council member said. His name was Arn, and he was the newest member of the council. We cannot simply wait to die. What would you have us do? Bren asked. Our fleet is destroyed. Our weapons are toys compared to theirs. We have nothing left. Lyra stepped forward. There is one thing, she said. The emergency beacon. Silence fell over the chamber. The emergency beacon was ancient technology, created in the early days of the galactic community. It was meant to call for help from other species when a civilization faced total destruction. It had been used only twice in recorded history. Who would answer? Bren asked. The Tyranni have already refused us. They say the Krath are too dangerous to fight. The Mythic are on the other side of the galaxy. It would take them years to reach us. The Urali have stopped responding to all communication. There are other species, Lyra said. Younger ones. Less known. Children playing among giants, Ren said bitterly. What could they possibly do? I do not know, Lyra admitted. But I know that doing nothing means death. If there is even a small chance that someone will help us, we must try. Elder Bren was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Activate the beacon. Lyra walked to the center of the chamber where a small pedestal held a device that had not been touched in centuries. She placed her hand on it. The device hummed and began to glow with soft light. Somewhere deep in space, a signal began traveling outward at impossible speed, reaching toward every corner of the galaxy. They waited. Hours passed. The sky outside grew darker as more smoke rose from the burning cities. The sound of explosions grew closer. Council members left one by one to be with their families. Only Lyra, Bren, and young Oren remained. Nothing, Bren said. No one is coming. Then a light flashed on the communication screen. Oren jumped to his feet. A response. Someone is answering. Lyra rushed to the screen and accepted the transmission. A face appeared, but it was not what she expected. The being had smooth skin and a shade of brown, with dark hair cut short and eyes that were small compared to Valari eyes, but seemed to burn with intensity. The being wore some kind of uniform in dark blue. This is Admiral Taiho of the United Earth Defense Force, the being said. We received your emergency signal. We are humans. How can we help? Lyra blinked. She had heard of humans, a young species from a small planet in the outer arm of the galaxy. They had only discovered faster than light travel 200 years ago. They were considered primitive by galactic standards. "You are offering to help us?" Lyra asked. "Yes," the human said simply. "That is why we are responding. Your signal said you needed help. Do you understand what you are offering to face?" Elder Bren stepped forward, his voice urgent. "The Krath Dominion has destroyed civilizations far older and more powerful than yours. They have ships beyond counting, weapons that can crack planets. They have never been defeated." The human called Taiho listened without expression. When Bren finished speaking, Taiho nodded once. "I understand," he said. "Send us your location and any tactical information you have about the enemy fleet. We will come." "But why?" Lyra could not understand. "You owe us nothing. We have never even met your species. Why would you risk yourselves for strangers?" Taiho was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was calm, but there was something hard beneath the calm, like iron wrapped in cloth. "Because you asked," he said. "On Earth, we have a saying. When someone asks for help, you help them. It does not matter if they are strangers. It does not matter if it is dangerous. You help them because that is what you do." The transmission ended. The council chamber was silent. "They are insane," Orin whispered. "Perhaps," Elder Bren said slowly. "Or perhaps they are something we have never seen before." Lyra stared at the blank screen. For the first time in days, she felt something other than fear. She did not know what it was. It might have been hope in the sky above Ashara. The Krath fleet continued its advance. They did not know that far across the galaxy, a species they had never heard of was preparing to prove them wrong about everything. The message reached Earth at 3 in the morning, Sol time. Within 1 hour, every major government on the planet had been informed. Within 2 hours, the United Nations Emergency Assembly had been called to session. Within 3 hours, the decision had been made. Humanity was going to war. Defense Minister Yuna stood at the center of the assembly hall. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair that she kept tied back. She had spent 30 years in military service before entering politics. She had seen what war could do to people and to worlds. She did not take the decision lightly. "The Valari are facing extinction," she said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. "The enemy they face, the Krath Dominion, has never been defeated. Their fleet outnumbers ours by a factor of 3. Their technology is centuries ahead of our own in some areas." She paused and looked around the room. "I will not lie to you. Many of us will not come back." The chamber was silent. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in their seats, listening. "But I will tell you what I told the military council this morning," Yuna continued. "These people sent a call for help into the darkness of space. They did not know who would hear it. They did not know if anyone would answer. They only knew that they were dying and that they had to try." Her voice hardened. "We heard them. We are going to answer. That is who we are." The vote was not unanimous. Some representatives argued that Earth could not afford to lose ships and soldiers in a war that was not their own. Others said that the Krath might turn their attention to Earth if humans interfered. The debates lasted for hours. In the end, the decision passed by a margin of 3-1. Earth would fight. General Dohan was given command of the fleet. He was a tall man with a scarred face and hands that had known both weapons and hard labor. He had fought in the Mars Uprising 20 years ago and had seen the worst that humans could do to each other. He had also seen the best. "We are mobilizing everything," he announced to his commanders in a secure briefing room. "The 3rd Fleet, the 5th Fleet, every carrier, every destroyer, every fighter wing. I want ships that have been sitting in storage for a decade pulled out and made ready. I want every pilot who can fly and every gunner who can shoot." "Sir, the logistics alone will take weeks," one of his officers said. "We have 72 hours, Dohan replied. Make it happen. Across Earth and throughout the solar system, the call went out. Soldiers who had retired years ago received messages on their personal devices asking them to return to service. Factory workers who had never seen combat volunteered to learn. Medical students left their classrooms to join hospital ships. Engineers abandoned private projects to help repair old warships. In Seoul, a young pilot named Minho stood in line at a recruitment center. The line stretched around the block and down the street. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted to fight. Have you ever been in real combat? The recruitment officer asked him. No, Minho admitted. Only simulations. You know you might die out there. I know. Minho did not hesitate. But those people are dying right now. They asked for help. I'm not going to sit here and do nothing. The officer stamped his papers and sent him through. On the orbital station above Earth, Captain Soman walked through the corridors of the battleship Resolute. The ship was old but solid, and her crew was the best she had ever commanded. Her first officer, Hyuk, fell into step beside her. The crew is ready, he reported. Morale is high. Everyone knows what we are facing. And they still want to go, Soman said. It was not a question. They do. Hyuk hesitated. Captain, can I ask you something? Ask. Do you think we can win? Soman stopped walking and turned to face him. I do not know, she said honestly. The Krath are stronger than us. They have more ships and more experience. By any logical measure, we should not stand a chance. Then why are we going? Soman smiled, but there was something fierce in her eyes. Because logic is not everything, Hyuk. The Valari are dying. They called out for help, and we heard them. If we do not go, who will? If we do not fight, what does that say about who we are? Hyuk nodded slowly. I understand. Good. Now get the crew to their stations. We leave in 6 hours. All across the fleet, similar conversations were happening. Soldiers said goodbye to their families. Parents hugged their children and promised to come back. Friends made promises to watch each other's backs. Everyone knew the risks. Everyone went anyway. 72 hours after the decision was made, the United Earth Defense Force jumped to hyperspace. 300 warships vanished from the solar system in a flash of light. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. And it was heading toward a battle that should have been impossible to win. In the command center of the Resolute, Captain Soman watched the stars blur into lines as the ship accelerated beyond the speed of light. Time to arrival at Ashara system, she called out. 18 hours. Captain, the navigation officer replied. All hands. This is the captain, Soman said over the ship's communication system. In 18 hours, we will arrive at our destination. We will face an enemy that has never been defeated. We will fight for people we have never met. She paused. I will not promise you that we will win. I will not promise you that we will survive. But I will promise you this. Whatever happens, we will not let them face this alone. That is our duty. That is our honor. That is what it means to be human. Across 300 ships, thousands of humans prepared for battle. They checked their weapons and ran their systems and said quiet prayers to whatever they believed in. They were afraid, but they were also determined. Somewhere far away, the Valari were still dying. Help was coming. It would arrive soon enough, or it would arrive too late. Either way, humanity would be there. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like a school of fish bursting from deep water. 300 ships of all sizes materialized in the dark space above the Valari homeworld of Ashara. For a moment, there was only silence and the cold light of distant stars. Then they saw what they had come to fight. The Krath Armada filled the space between Ashara and its moons. There were ships beyond counting, each one a twisted mass of organic metal that looked more grown than built. They were covered in spines and ridges, and their surfaces pulsed with a sickly green light. Some of them were larger than anything humanity had ever constructed. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Soman stared at the view screen and felt her heart turn cold. "How many?" she asked quietly. "Scanners count 900 primary combat vessels," the tactical officer reported. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Unknown number of support craft and fighters. Captain, they outnumber us 3-1. "I can count," Soman said. She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to the fleet flagship. Admiral Taiho needs to know what we are looking at." On the flagship Resolution, Admiral Taiho was already studying the enemy formation. His staff stood around him, their faces pale in the light of the tactical displays. No one spoke. "Sir," his aide finally said, "we should consider retreat. The odds are not in our favor." Taiho shook his head slowly. "We did not come here to retreat. Open a channel to the craft command ship." The communication screen flickered, and then a face appeared that made several officers step back in fear. The craft were not beautiful. They had gray skin stretched tight over angular bones, and their mouths were filled with teeth designed for tearing. Their eyes were red and burned with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. The Krath, who appeared on screen, wore ornaments made of bone. His voice came through the translator as a series of clicks and growls converted into words. "So you are the humans," the Krath said. "I am Warlord Gal. I command this fleet. I have heard whispers about your species. Young, primitive, barely crawled out of your birth ocean. I am Admiral Taiho of the United Earth Defense Force," Taiho replied. His voice was calm. "You will withdraw from the system immediately." Warlord Gal made a sound that the translator identified as laughter. It was not a pleasant sound. "Withdraw? You come to our hunting ground with your tiny ships and your short lives, and you tell us to withdraw." Gal leaned forward, and his red eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Human, we have crushed civilizations that existed before your species learned to walk upright. We have harvested worlds while your ancestors were still fighting with sticks. You are nothing." Taiho did not flinch. "You may be right," he said. "We are young. Our ships are not as advanced as yours. We have never fought a war on this scale." He paused. "But we have fought wars. Many of them. Mostly against ourselves." Gal tilted his head, curious despite himself. "You fight your own kind?" "We fight everyone," Taiho said simply. "We fight because we are angry. We fight because we are afraid. We fight because we love something worth protecting. We have spent most of our history learning how to kill each other in creative ways." His voice dropped lower. "Every weapon on these ships was designed to destroy the most dangerous enemy we ever faced, ourselves. Do you understand what that means?" Gal's laughter stopped. "It means that when we fight, we do not stop. We do not surrender. We do not negotiate." Taiho's eyes were hard now, like stones pulled from a frozen river. "These people asked for our help. We gave our word. And humans keep their word, even when it costs us everything." "Pretty words," Gal growled, but some of the confidence had left his voice. "Words do not win battles." "No," Taiho agreed. "Actions do. So here is what is going to happen, Warlord. You are going to leave this system. You are going to leave these people alone. And you are going to do it now, or we are going to make you do it." "Make us?" Gal snarled. "You think you can threaten the Krath Dominion? We will crush you like insects. We will scatter your ashes across the void." "Maybe," Taiho said. "But we will take a lot of you with us. And the ones who survive will have to explain to your masters how the mighty Krath Dominion was bloodied by a species of primitives who have been flying through space for only 200 years. He smiled, and there was no warmth in it. That is not a threat, Warlord. That is a promise. The channel closed. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew stared at each other in silence. Then the tactical officer spoke. Captain, the Krath fleet is moving. They are forming attack formation. Soman took a deep breath and straightened her uniform. All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. Throughout the human fleet, alarms began to sound. Pilots ran to their fighters. Gunners strapped themselves into their seats. Engineers made final checks on engines and weapons. Everyone knew what was about to happen. They are coming, Hyuk said quietly. Let them come, Soman replied. We did not fly across the galaxy to run away. In her fighter, Lieutenant Minho gripped his controls and watched the massive Krath ships growing larger on his screen. His hands were sweating, but his heart was steady. He thought about his family back on Earth. He thought about the Valari children dying on the planet below. He thought about the promise Admiral Taiho had made. Humans keep their word. The first weapons fired, and space erupted into fire and death. The Battle of Ashara had begun. The battle began with fire and fury. Krath weapons tore through space, filling the darkness with beams of green energy that could melt through metal like hot water through ice. 2 human destroyers died in the first minute, their crews gone in flashes of light and heat. The Krath moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. But humans did not fight the way the Krath expected. Lieutenant Minho pushed his fighters' engines to their maximum speed. His squadron followed close behind, 12 small ships against a vast Krath armada. Any other species would have kept their distance. Trying to fight from range where the enemy's superior firepower would give them an advantage. Minho flew straight into the heart of the Krath formation. What are you doing? A Valari observer screamed over the communication channel. That is suicide. Fall back. Negative, Minho replied. His voice was calm even as enemy fire exploded around him. All fighters, break and engage. Getting close. Do not give them room to aim. The human pilots dove between the massive Krath ships, flying so close that the enemy's weapons could not track them without risking friendly fire. They were gnats attacking giants, but gnats with very sharp stings. Minho's targeting system locked onto a Krath cruiser's engine section. He fired all weapons at once. The explosions ripped through the enemy ship's unshielded rear, and it began to spin out of control, crashing into another Krath vessel beside it. 2 for 1, Minho said. Keep moving. Never stop moving. The Krath had never faced this kind of fighting before. Their enemies usually tried to maintain formation and fight in organized lines. Humans fought like wild animals, attacking from every direction at once, using the enemy's own ships as cover. On the Resolute, Captain Soman watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. The human fleet was taking heavy losses, but they were inflicting damage too. More damage than the Krath had expected. Captain, Hugh reported, the Krath command ship is moving to the center of their formation. They think they are safe there. Soman studied the display for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was not a nice smile. Helm, set course directly for the Krath command ship. All power to forward shields. Hyuk turned to stare at her. Captain, that will take us through the center of their fleet. I know. We will be surrounded. I know. We might not survive. Soman looked at her first officer. Hyuk, we did not come here to survive. We came here to win. Now follow my orders. The Resolute surged forward, its engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Krath ships turned to intercept, their weapons firing. The human battleship's shields flickered and sparked under the assault, but they held. Barely. Maintain course, Soman ordered. Do not slow down. The Krath command ship grew larger on the view screen. It was a monster of a vessel, covered in weapons and surrounded by escorts. Warlord Gal himself was aboard. Watching the foolish humans fly to their death's dot at the last possible moment, Soman gave her order. Cut engines. Roll 90 degrees. All starboard guns fire. The Resolute twisted in space, presenting its entire right side to the Krath command ship. At point-blank range, where the enemy's shields were weakest, every weapon on the human ship fired at once. The Krath command ship's shields collapsed. Its hull tore open. Explosions ripped through its decks. Warlord Gal barely managed to evacuate to another vessel as his flagship died around him. But the battle was not over yet. In the cargo holds of a crippled craft cruiser, Sergeant G1 led her Marine squad through the darkness. Boarding actions were considered impossible against the Krath. Their ships were death traps for invaders, filled with traps and warriors who lived for close combat. Humans did it anyway. Move fast and stay together, G1 ordered. Her voice was steady even though her heart was pounding. They do not expect us. Use that. The Krath warriors were waiting for them around every corner. They were larger than humans, with natural armor covering their bodies and claws that could tear through metal. They had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing. The humans had spent centuries doing the same thing. G1 threw a flashbang around the corner and charged through the explosion. Her rifle fired in short bursts, each shot finding its target. Behind her, her squad moved like they had trained for years together, covering each other, advancing step by step. A Krath warrior lunged at her from the shadows. G1 dropped her rifle and drew her combat knife. The Krath was stronger, but she was faster. She dodged its claws and drove her blade into the gap in its armor at the throat. The warrior fell. G1 picked up her rifle and kept moving. Room by room, deck by deck, the Marines cleared the ship. The Krath had never been boarded before. They had no protocols for it, no training. They fell back in confusion, then in fear. Across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships used tactics that defied everything the Krath knew about warfare. They hid behind asteroids and used debris as decoys. They rammed enemy ships when their weapons ran empty. They ejected from dying vessels and were picked up by passing destroyers to fight again. Warlord Gal watched his perfect battle fall apart. His losses were mounting faster than he could believe. These primitives, these children of a backwater planet, were hurting him. Fall back, he finally ordered. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. All ships, fall back. The Krath fleet began to retreat. The humans chased them, pressing the attack, refusing to let them escape easily. By the time the surviving Krath ships jumped to hyperspace, they had lost nearly 2/3 of their forces. It was the first defeat the Krath Dominion had suffered in 800 years. On the surface of Ashara, Ambassador Lyra watched the human ships moving through the debris field above her world. Many of them were damaged. Some were barely holding together. But they were still there. They had won. She did not know how. She did not understand why. But they had won. In her fighter, Lieutenant Minho floated among the wreckage, waiting for rescue. His ship was dead, its power gone. He was breathing the last of his oxygen, but he was alive. And below him, the Valari homeworld was still standing. It was enough. The twin suns of Ashara rose over a world that had nearly died. The cities still burned in some places. The skies were still dark with smoke. Millions of Valari were dead, and millions more were homeless and hungry. But they were alive. Against all odds, against all reason, they had survived. Ambassador Lyra stood in what remained of the capital's main plaza. The buildings around her were broken shells, and the streets were filled with rubble. But there were also people. Valari survivors emerged from shelters and hiding places, blinking in the light of the new day. And among them moved humans. Medical ships had descended from orbit. Within hours of the battle's end, Teens in white uniforms spread across the devastation, pulling survivors from collapsed buildings and setting up field hospitals wherever they could find space. They brought food, water, medicine, and something else that could not be measured: hope. A young human medic named Yunji knelt beside a Valari child who had been trapped in rubble for 3 days. The child was frightened and would not let anyone touch her. Yunji did not speak Valari, and the translator struggled with emotional words, but she sat with the child anyway. She spoke softly. She smiled. She waited. Eventually, the child reached out and took her hand. Admiral Taiho walked through the plaza with Lyra at his side. He looked tired. His uniform was dirty and torn, and there were bandages on his hands from helping with the rescue efforts. He had not slept since the battle ended. "I do not understand," Lyra said finally. The words had been building inside her since she had watched the human fleet emerge from hyperspace. "You lost ships. You lost people. So many of your soldiers died for us. Why would you sacrifice so much for strangers?" Taiho stopped walking and looked around at the ruins and the survivors and the human crews working beside Valari volunteers. He was quiet for a long moment. "When I was young," he said, "there was a disaster on Earth. A city was destroyed by an earthquake. Thousands of people were trapped. My mother was one of them." Lyra waited in silence. People came from all over the world to help. They flew across oceans. They left their jobs and their families. They dug through rubble with their bare hands. Most of them did not know anyone in that city. They came anyway. Taiho's voice was soft. "One of them found my mother. She was alive because a stranger decided she was worth saving." He turned to face Lyra. "You asked for help. That is not nothing. That is everything. It means you believed someone might care enough to answer. You trusted the universe to send you someone who would not let you face extinction alone." "But the cost," Lyra whispered. "How can we ever repay what you have given?" Taiho shook his head. "You do not have to. That is not why we came. We came because it was right. Because someone asked. Because that is what we do." Word of the Battle of Ashara spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Species that had hidden from the craft for generations began to emerge from their hiding places. Old enemies reached out to old enemies and spoke of peace. The galactic community, which had been dying for centuries under the shadow of Krath aggression, began to breathe again. The Tyranny ambassador, who had refused the Valari's desperate plea for help, sent a message to Earth. "We underestimated you," the message said. "We thought you were young and foolish, too weak to matter. We were wrong. Please forgive us." Defense Minister Yuna read the message in her office back on Earth. She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. The victory had cost Earth 47 ships and more than 12,000 lives. "Tell them we are not angry," she replied. "Fear is a powerful thing. It makes cowards of us all sometimes. But tell them this as well. We do not intend to build an empire. We do not want to rule anyone. We only want one thing." "What is that?" the Tyranny ambassador asked. "We want to live in a galaxy where no one has to face extinction alone. Help us build that, and we can be friends." In the months that followed, humanity did not claim any Valari territory. They did not demand payment or tribute. They helped rebuild what had been destroyed, trained Valari soldiers to defend themselves, and then they went home. But they left something behind. Not ships or weapons, but something more powerful, a promise. "If you need us," Admiral Taiho told the Valari Council before he departed, "call us. We will come. It does not matter how far. It does not matter how dangerous. You are not alone anymore." The story of what humanity had done spread to every corner of the galaxy. Species that had never heard of Earth began to whisper a new truth among themselves. If you are desperate, if you are alone, if you have lost all hope, Call the humans. They will come. They always come. On a small planet in a forgotten system, a species facing destruction activated their emergency beacon for the first time in their history. They did not expect an answer. They had been told that no one in the galaxy cared about small, unimportant worlds. 2 days later, human ships appeared in their sky. On the flagship, a young officer named Soman, recently promoted after the Battle of Ashara, opened a communication channel. "This is Captain Soman of the United Earth Defense Force," she said. "We received your distress call. How can we help?" And far away, on a planet called Earth, children grew up hearing the story of the day humanity answered a call from strangers and flew into fire to save them. They learned that strength was not measured in ships or weapons, but in the choice to help others, even when it was hard, even when it was dangerous, even when there was nothing to gain. They learned that this was what it meant to be human. Some things were worth fighting for. Some promises were worth keeping. And some species, against all expectations, could change the galaxy just by being willing to say yes when someone asked for help. The Valari remembered this lesson for 10,000 years. They never forgot the day the humans came